Welcome to the Relationship Toolbox, a show about the skills we need to build healthy relationships with others. In the past, we've discussed the importance of skills of listening and expressing oneself. For the expression part, we've talked about the importance of using something like the I message. And in listening, we've talked about the need to listen carefully to what people are saying, listen for the emotions that are underlying the words, be able to summarize what the person is saying, and to perhaps ask some open-ended questions for clarification if needed, and finally to confirm with the speaker, do I understand what you have said? So today we're going to be talking about the final step in working through a disagreement, this time with a spouse or a partner. And Marsha is going to be joining me today with that. The thing that we want to stress in this is that negotiation is what we're going to be talking about today, and this has to occur after these other steps have happened, the good listening, the clarification in what I'm saying, and this being done in a respectful way. So if you try to do negotiating before that has occurred, it most likely will not work, and you may end up in more arguments. So the test to know, is this the time to start negotiating, is, can I state what my partner's point of view is and also why she feels that way, and can she do the same for me? If the answer to that is a positive, yes, we can do that, then you're most likely ready to start the negotiation. Now, the word negotiation, Marsha, really conjures up different things for different people, so maybe you could address that.
So when we're talking about negotiation, we're really talking about any time when two people or two parties are directly trying to find a solution with each other, as opposed to involving other people. And we negotiate informally all the time when we say, well, you know, what do you want to watch tonight? What kind of a movie do you want to see? Or how do you want to spend the weekend, or what do you want to have for dinner? And those are very low stakes, informal negotiations. Mm-hmm. But negotiation has acquired a bad reputation when you think about people who do it adversarially. This is often true when people are negotiating who don't expect to have an ongoing relationship. Mm-hmm. And in those situations, it's about manipulation and hiding information and trying to outsmart each other, and it's a win-lose kind of deception, not revealing what you want, which is not what we're talking about today at all, mm-hmm. but kind of strategic. And we're not talking about that. In close relationships, that doesn't work, because after the negotiation, you still have a relationship, yes. and you want to preserve that relationship. So for the purposes of today, we're talking about negotiating in the context of a mutually acceptable solution and using the principles of fairness, of openness, of honesty, and respect.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, as you say, that can be contrary to what we've thought of in using the word negotiation.
Right.
So sometimes people will use a different problem solving or something like that rather than the word negotiating. But negotiating doesn't have to be those negative things that you talked about.
Yeah. And shouldn't be, in fact, if you're going to preserve a relationship.
They're disastrous to a relationship.
You can use those strategies if you don't want to preserve the relationship. Mm-hmm. And if the solution is your end game. But if the solution within the context of a relationship is then it's a different story.
Yes, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the common issues or arguments that couples might have that often need negotiation to work through.
Well, there's the big one, money. You know, depending on how you devise your spending, it could be that some people pay for some things and the other person pays for other things, and so how do you work that out? Or if you pool your finances, how do you decide together what is important to spend money on and when? So that can be
That's a universal, isn't it?
yeah, because you've worked hard for your resources and you have different expectations about what's important. Daily tasks within the structure of being together. Who does what, and what's the distribution of the work? And I think these days we may be finding that couples are needing to renegotiate that because our living conditions, at least temporarily, have changed. So there could be some negotiating about how to revise that.
And that can evolve over time too, with children or just in one's relationship, job changes and so forth.
These are the agreements we used to have, but now things have changed. The children have left. I'm tired of cooking, 7 days a week.
Right.
Could
Just
you
tired
help
of doing the
me,
same task
or
over
whatever,
and over.
or maybe somebody is abled or disabled and things need to be changed.
Yes. Another one I can think of is sort of allotment of our time. We need time for each other. Obviously, if we didn't have that, a relationship wouldn't thrive very well. We need time for ourselves.
Yeah, that gets overlooked a lot.
It does, yeah. And sometimes that can also be a sensitive item, because if somebody needs a little bit more time for himself or herself than the other partner may see that as pulling away.
Yeah, or rejection.
A rejection,
even.
yes.
What's, we're supposed to be a couple. We're supposed to do everything together. Well, that's
Right.
not always true.
Time that our work takes, and also time, allotment of time in terms of what we spend to socialize, either as a couple with other couples or individually. So all those are typical things where we have to distribute our allotment of time. Another one, universal, is sex. How much, when, who initiates, and sexual technique. These are all things that need to be negotiated. And again, as time goes on, that may change a little bit. So it may be renegotiated at times. So that's another very common.
Obligations outside of the tasks that you do for each other too. Family members and organizations, caring for elderly parents or friends. That would play into it. About friends, choice of friends.
Yes.
Who do you let into your relationship, and to what extent, and how frequently? Do you do it as a couple? Do you do it individually? And that can be tricky. And the quality and quantity of how you express your affection for each other. We've talked in previous shows about the different love languages.
Yes.
Just expressing what you need and what the other person needs, which is not always the same thing.
I think this is something too where, again, the good use of the word negotiation, often we may not understand that these are common things to negotiate. It isn't something that, well, if you loved me, we would just know what to do.
Right.
But with it really does have to be negotiated or renegotiated as time goes on.
Both.
So that's why we're kind of using that term to help couples to become aware that it's normal to negotiate, and therefore it's a skill that we use and can really draw us close together as we use the skill well.
As things come in, as stimulus and as changes affect us from the outside, we need to imagine how we're going to deal with it individually and together. And that's always happening.
Yes.
So our relationship is not static.
Yes.
It doesn't okay, we got married happily ever after with no maintenance. We don't expect other things to survive and to thrive without maintenance. Our cars, our clothes, our houses. So this is the kind of way we can maintain.
Right, that's a good. I think that's a good word for it. Maintaining. The other killer of this is assumptions.
Yeah.
That I just assumed you would do this or you would feel this way about it.
Or I've been modeling for you what I want.
Yes.
And you haven't noticed.
You haven't picked up on it.
It's just kind of it's a recalibration, and we need to recalibrate every now and then.
Yes.
So this is how we do it.
So if let's assume that we have talked over an issue and that each one of us can clearly state the point of view of the other, although we may not agree with it, and why, what the reasons are behind it. We need to prepare for the negotiation. It isn't something that we just go into automatically. So let's talk a little bit about preparing for that. There are two questions that I think we could start off with. Am I clear about what I'm asking for? That sometimes there's, again, assumptions in there. Well, didn't I say it clearly? And the other party may have a totally different impression of what we're trying to ask for. And have I done it respectfully? Or I might be in my preparation thinking of, okay, this is the way I kind of talked about it before. What's another way that I might be able to present my issues in a respectful way that might make more sense?
Well,
to
because
the other
we
party?
we are influenced by our previous negotiations.
Yes.
And you can think about, okay, so how did it go before, and what could I change in order to maybe make it more successful? Because that's all I can do, is I can only change me.
Right.
So what could I do differently? Maybe it's a sequence, maybe it's an explanation or a clarity. How can I shape this in a different way?
Based upon what I learned, if there was good listening, what did I learn? Rather than if the emphasis is going on what I'm going to say and shifting that from what did I learn from what she said to me? And how might I think about that for a little bit and then maybe change in my approach?
Yeah. So we might also just think about what am I feeling? What am I thinking to myself about this issue? Just like, what's going on?
Yes. That gets back into those skills we've talked about before. If you can't put a name to a feeling, you can easily become a victim or a reactor to it.
Yeah, but so like, am I angry about this? Am I defeated before I even start? So, think about, how am I feeling? And what am I feeling?
Okay. Sometimes in taking a pause in this process and thinking about it, it turns out that the issue that we are arguing about isn't the issue at all.
Yeah.
So I may have been upset about the way the issue was presented to me. I may have been upset with the timing of it. Maybe I was busy trying to do something, and my wife comes up to me and says, I need to tell you about something, and I'm just not ready for it at that point. So I react to it.
Sometimes we're afraid to even say it, so we dance around the issue too.
Yes.
And so that doesn't help the other
It's
person.
not clear then.
It's like, I really want to say this, but I'm trying to say it in this euphemistic, soft, kind of a roundabout way.
Yes.
And it's not helpful.
Right. It
Because
makes
I'm
more
not-
confusion with
Yeah.
it, yes. So even sometimes being in a bad mood with it, if you're able to say, I do want to hear this, but I'm just really not in the mood for it right now. And then again, as we've talked about before, when you postpone something, don't just leave it up in the air. Give a time
Have a specific
when we
time,
can revisit it.
Sometimes it's about just trying to figure out what is so important about this to the other person, because you can't see that.
Yes.
And just putting yourselves in the other person's shoes for a minute, it's like, what is so important about this? And by examining that, it could prepare you for this conversation. Also, you may want to ask, kind of going back to how am I feeling about this? Am I in control of my emotions? Have I slept? Am I feeling sick? Am I in a hurry? Or am I so emotionally charged about this that I'm not going to be able to bring my best self?
Even identifying what the triggers are for an emotion I really don't want to get involved in again with it, and being able to share that with the other party can be of help. So
it's hard because we have patterns. We have natural patterns that we've just fall into, like ruts during mud season, It's the way we go. And it's hard to kind of steer out of those places, which are just natural.
And unlike other forms of negotiation that you've referenced before, when we've been partners, we really know our vulnerable times and our buttons that we can press. So if we get in an emotional state of, how dare you, I'm going to get you back now, even though we may not think that way, but subconsciously that's how it's coming through. Zingo, we send out a little missile ourselves, and the argument is on. So also thinking about if you take a pause from it, as you say, looking from the other person's point of view, are there some suggestions when I think more about where they're coming from that I might come up with that are acceptable to me as well? And that gets you ready for that negotiating step. Also, I think we have to overcome that sense of defeatism, that we've
this
talked
isn't going to
about.
work.
Yeah,
We've
here
been
we go
down this
again.
road again.
Yeah.
It's like, why
Well,
should I even try?
Exactly.
Because this is impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of negotiation, that you work at it, and if it isn't working right then you can stop and pick it up again. Over time, the chances are that you will find a way through it, and later on we're going to talk about some ways if you really get into a stalemate and just can't get through it, there are some other ways that we can suggest for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the language of negotiation itself. We're not talking about technique here, but just if we are really negotiating in the style that we're trying to talk about here, with respect and caring and honesty and openness, fairness. These are some of the words that we should hear.
Yeah. But we frequently start with things like, I think we should.
Right. If we start out with that.
I figured it out, or hear me out, or,
Yeah.
It's all about
Here's my solution to it. Yeah.
And I figured it out, and it's all wrapped up in a package, and I've got this cherished solution, and here it is.
Yeah.
Because I know better.
Right. And when that starts it off, that kicks in usually the defensiveness of the other party right away.
Yeah.
So in contrast to that, what we're suggesting here is some lead-in phrases such as, well, what if, and then you put in a suggestion, an alternative with it. What would you be willing to, and then again put in something that it might not be something that you are totally okay with, but it starts the thinking, the process of the negotiating. Could we agree to, again putting in something, or would you consider? All these are showing respect for the other person's perspective on it rather than one's own.
And I hear a lot of different pronouns. We talk about I messages, but this is not the kind of I message we're talking about when I have figured it all out and I'm presenting it to you. That, that's a completely different story. So what I'm hearing in the things that you're offering are an invitation. I'm hearing the plural. I'm hearing could we, what if we, what, and questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's indicating you're important in this process.
Instead of things like, well, what works for me? And, to continue to push for what is important to me.
Yeah. Often, excuse me, I can get into that myself of thinking, well, I'll make the point again, then I'll make it again.
Because you didn't hear it.
Yeah,
Maybe if I say it louder
Right.
or repeat it, you'll hear it the second time.
And that pushing just begins to turn people off, or they might just give in for the sake of just, I can't stand this anymore.
Yeah.
And then we haven't really resolved it, we've just put up with it. So if it reaches the point where we're still negotiating and not really coming up with something yet, I can still keep tossing the ball to the other party by saying, what ideas can you think of? So that's letting them know, I'm interested in your point of view and what you might have to do. And then that takes the focus for the other party from defending herself to looking at a possible solution that she might think is okay.
Yeah.
And I haven't thought
It's
of.
an expansion. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Another lead-in phrase would be, what would be another acceptable solution for you, which is similar to that? Or do you see any room for compromise in this, which is introducing a process already of give in a little bit and lose a little bit, but gain a little bit? And is that a possible way? So again, you're sort of teasing out ways of approaching this issue from the hard and fast, my way, no, my way.
Right. Well, some people could still say, I've given you a logical solution, and let's get this wrapped up, or this is perfectly obvious, this is the best way to do it.
Yes. Impatience is a killer of the negotiation
Impatience
process.
or kind of like righteousness. It's like, this is...
And both can go together. Since I know what's right, why are you taking all this time? You have to go through
Can't you
this.
see?
Yes.
Can't you see? And it's really more about, can I not see?
Right.
Perhaps, but it's...
So to do that, we can also use lead-in phrases which imply I am willing to make some concessions or to shift a little bit. such as, would it help if I, and then you put in something that you're willing to do. Would you like to have more time to think about this? So that, again, gives a respect to the other party. I've certainly worked with people who one party can make decisions just like that, and another one needs, I need to think about this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the last one is, what could I do that would make a difference for you? So it's, again, inviting that respect that there may be something I haven't even thought of that would make it easier for you to negotiate with me or to even resolve this issue.
Right. So the difference that we're seeing in each case is that you have asked me questions as the model negotiator. Like, you've invited me into the conversation. You've proposed in an invitation kind of way what might be possible. And traditionally, we think of something and we just make a statement.
Yeah.
And we offer it, maybe with all the best of intentions, but we're not including the other person in the process and in the kind of the clarification and the ratification. It's like, I thought of this, what about, even by saying, what about, you're inviting the participation of the other person instead of, I figured it out, this is what we should do. And
countering that temptation, especially I think for men, and that is, we got to fix this thing. Let's stop all this talking. This is nonsense. Let's just get to the gist of it, and we'll get this thing solved. And there's only one way to look at it, or there's only two ways to look at it. Take your choice, this or this.
Right.
And again, that just breaks down the negotiation right away because it doesn't show respect for another person's perspective on it, and show patience to work with it.
And involvement, participation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be impatient. We can say, this is getting frustrating for me with it, and let the other party know. But still respecting the fact that, okay, you may take some more time to do this than I take for.
But there are symptoms that you can pick up on that if the negotiation in its best form is not working.
Yeah, if it's going south.
And one would be arguing. Instead of collaborating and offering suggestions or possibilities or what ifs, you are arguing. And then
it would sound like, why can't you see? Which is carrying its own message. Let me explain it again. I keep telling you.
Yeah.
And that's push, push, push.
Arguing, And if you shift from dealing with the issue and instead of attacking the issue and working on the issue, you start attacking the person.
Right.
That is a sign that things are not going well.
Well, if you weren't so selfish about this, bingo. We're not even debating the issue anymore. Now there's an attack.
So that could make my emotions get a little hotter. And then we know that when my emotions are getting hotter, things are not going well.
That's right.
Or if we're going to start bringing up the past.
You always do that. Remember the time when?
Okay, so that's not productive because we're not forward thinking about this topic in front of us. We're digging up old things.
And that's always been the beauty of doing mediation with people because we're interested in from this moment on.
Yeah,
what
given
can we do?
that we're in this situation, what do we do?
Yes.
And then you can always bring in the other people. Well, your friends or your family or most people or,
Yeah. Well, our friends agreed with me on this, that you were being unreasonable.
Yeah. Or I read an article where it said all men, whatever, to kind of bolster your position. You're bringing in these people who are not in the room with you.
Make it illegitimate,
Or you could just be putting somebody down and discounting them.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Or, you've never been good at finances, so you just need to leave this up to me or whatever. And it could escalate to threats. And obviously, when you've reached that point, the
I'm just going to do it my way
well.
anyway. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it.
Yeah. So.
So if you reach, those are the things, the signs of stop when it reaches that point, because you're not really negotiating at that point. You're just exchanging missiles back and forth.
Yeah.
And that will do damage and make it all the more difficult to get back to negotiating at some point.
And perhaps you didn't understand the other person's perspective to begin with, and you should go reset.
Or perhaps you're being triggered by something that is not intended.
It's really easy.
Yeah, it's real easy to get into that.
But if we went back to that scenario of perhaps, thinking about the division of tasks, which is it can be benign, it can be really charged, but some things that you could do
If you just can't, if you're
If
deadlocked.
things are deadlocked, but not to the hot emotions or threatening, you could accommodate.
Yes.
You know, if there's a point which seems to be really important to the other person, you could accommodate, as long as you think you're not going to resent it later.
Right. And this is a very tricky one because if you, accommodating can be a very loving thing to do.
Yeah.
But if somebody is very super sensitive to being accommodating, you know, and feeling like I'm always giving in to people, then they take that opportunity away. But again, as you mentioned, if you accommodate only to avoid the issue and keep it from coming up again, and later on you're thinking, why did I do that?
But that's not,
it's just building more
not
problems.
healthy. You could also arbitrate. You could have a third party come in. If you really need to have somebody kind of help you have this difficult conversation.
Especially a professional. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes when couples are fighting about a way to deal with a child's problem, and they each have very different experiences in their own family of origin. And they say, well, why don't we talk with a psychologist or someone who works with children a lot and find out what they might suggest in a situation like this.
Or talk to an accountant if you're having money issues or something,
yes.
or tax. There are people who can help you.
So another one is to, what we referred to here, just postponing and saying,
Yeah.
it looks like we're not going to be able to work this out right away. Let's just take some time to think about it. And there is a real benefit sometimes to just letting time itself sort of percolate through your thinking. And it may be that in a week, something like 2 weeks, that you don't see it in the same way as you did before.
Or the conditions that you brought to it, you know, your capacity may have changed as well.
May have changed as well, yeah. Another possibility is just to dismiss it and to say, you know, as we're talking about this, it really isn't that important to me. And the other party may say, you're right. It isn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
Why are we arguing about it?
You've kind of clenched into this, like, death spiral, but
Right.
it's really not about that. It's just something else, maybe.
Uh-huh.
So even if you have come to what you think is a negotiated solution, it's good to check back, and just because you want to make sure that somebody hasn't been resentful or capitulated, and just test it and say, you know, is this still working?
Yes.
Is it working for both of us?
And what a powerful message that gives about it's important to me that you're okay with this solution.
Yeah, I just want to be sure.
Yeah.
And along with that, being grateful for the person's participation and rewarding. You know, what we get good feelings about, we replicate. And showing that you are thankful, you have gratitude for going through this process may kind of make it easier the next time.
It's amazing when we've been in mediation to see when someone does that.
Yeah.
It shows appreciation toward the other person, how it sort of melts the heat in the air a little
Yeah.
bit, and it softens things.
It does. So you can negotiate, not in a strategic kind of adversarial way, but you can do it fairly, openly, with honesty and respect in a close relationship. And we are grateful that you joined us today for the Relationship Toolbox, and we'll see you again soon.